Okay, we are live, people. This is the first time I've done something like this before, where it's all live and it's all weird because who knows what's going to happen, and it's just odd. So I went ahead and put a link so that everybody can go ahead and come on and come ask some questions and whatnot. If not, it'll be me talking about AMP. I actually haven't recorded anything this week, so I could just do my weekly video here if nobody decides to show up. Although we did have people who said they were coming. Who knows? So, um, first things first. Um, First things first. What is AMP? So AMP, it stands for people with accelerated mutant potential, and it's my RPG. It's my Supers RPG that I came up with because there was nothing like it. And when I say there was nothing like it, I mean, and I went and I played a lot of different Supers RPGs out there, and I played Mutants and Masterminds, and I played Champions, and you could do a lot, and they were very much built so that you could build any kind of character you wanted, and there were toolkits, and you could construct everything that you wanted, but it didn't seem like it was telling any kind of story. And any of the ones that were telling stories seemed like they were telling four-color classic hero, I'm wearing spandex and a cape kind of stories. The kind of heroes that I've been most interested in, though, have been the types of heroes where they're conflicted. And I would probably say it's more like Xavier and the X-Men than anything. And even in the book, I put them as a major influence, like in everything that they do, be it comics, be it movies. The X-Men are like they're the thing. Like they're the I am a person and I have been afflicted with this thing, and it's a power. And sometimes those powers are good, sometimes they're bad. Sometimes they have unknown consequences as to what could happen with it. I mean, just like Cyclops' power, for instance, is like very powerful and yet hurts him because it makes it so he can't see. Rogue uses her powers to, she's got an awesome power. She can borrow other people's powers and whatnot. But then at the same time, she can't touch anybody. And that's kind of the idea of kind of what I wanted to get across with AMP, is that sometimes powers aren't necessarily the best thing in the world. A lot of people fantasize about, man, if I only had that power, if I only had teleportation. Well, if you have teleportation, you might be blue with a tail. If you can shoot beams out, you might not be able to open your eyes otherwise. If you have the ability to borrow other people's powers, you might not be able to control it, and you might not even be able to touch anybody. And then, of course, there's people with awesome powers like Mystique, who can, do whatever she wants because she's Mystique. So, all right. So I've waxed on about API AMP a little bit. I have noticed that a few people have started to show up. I did start promptly at 8:30, just in case anybody did. If you guys have specific questions, do put them in the Q&A section there, and I will go about answering them until I see a few questions there. And this is obviously the beauty of live recording, is all my little hiccups, because my mouth often moves faster than my brain. So it's hard for me sometimes to form sentences. But it works out in the end. My videos that I release every week usually are the product of, a little bit of, just a few little tweaks of editing, but yeah, I don't have that now. Honestly, my nerves are destroyed right now, but let's continue on. So that was kind of the premise of coming up with AMP year one. And then obviously, another thing that I noticed in a lot of the games that I went and played was that there were a lot of just, hey, supers happened, here's all the stuff that happened to lead up to now. And now supers are a regular thing, so go and play. And it always seemed weird to me that these ones that did actually put forth the effort to give you a timeline, like Aberrant, like Progenitor, like some of those other ones that do this as well, that they did it and then kind of just, they kind of said, it's already done, now you go do other things. And I kind of wanted to put it under the microscope a little bit, and I really kind of wanted to look at what happens when supers come into the world. And the coolest thing about AMP Year 1 that we were able to explore was kind of that first year, and the theme of the first year was discovery. The theme of the first year was figuring out your powers, figuring out what's going on. There's a lot of mystery involved with AMP Year 1 that it slowly builds, and the drama, slowly comes to the forefront, and mysteries are revealed that not a lot of people take the time to really think about. So the way that the AMP Year 1 also storyline kind of started off is I came up with these groups, these factions that I really wanted to have highlighted in the game. And that would be the Seekers of Enlightenment, the Changelings, the United Human Front, and Typhoon. And while I was building the timeline and figuring out how these events sort of happened, I actually found when I was doing the timeline that a lot of them would not be immediate groups that would just immediately form, which is where a lot of people have said, well, there should be more groups. And I'm like, well, I was thinking about it in a very organic kind of way. It was the Seekers were the first ones, after the support groups and whatnot, but they were the first ones that kind of popped up. And then you notice that as time goes on, then Typhoon pops up and starts kind of doing their things with the organized crime and whatnot. And then the Changelings pop up, and then the United Human Front almost comes up right after them, almost as kind of an answer to them. But that doesn't even happen until later on in a year. So this whole first year of AMP was more about just kind of discovering the powers in general. It's one of those weird things. It's one of those things because I could have just said, well, the first month comes and everybody's just there and everybody does it and everybody just pops up at exactly the same time. But we really wanted to kind of ease it out. And for anybody who's watching, obviously questions can come at any time, and I will stop whatever I'm talking about to talk about them. Otherwise, I will continue to ramble. So it was pretty funny because there was a review about AMP Year 1 on the Misdirected Mark, which I'll be on, I believe, next week on their podcast. And Stacy Winters, who was the person who backed to have her name used in the book, didn't realize that I was going to use her name for such an important character, which is Critter. uh, and of course she's never stepped a foot onto a ranch before, which I found also pretty darn funny. Um, but Critter was the first amp, and she could talk to animals. And part of what I also wanted to do with Amp Year One was to also kind of look at some of these powers that people would say aren't powerful, such as transmutation or astral projection. These are powers that are mostly known as kind of secondary or passive powers, accompanying powers to your ability to shoot beams and abilities to lift a building, and those are the the big impressive powers. But one of the things I wanted to do with it was to really highlight what these more passive powers can do. Critter was an example of that, where she can talk to animals, and that's all she can do. She can talk to animals. That does change in year 2. I'll just say that. But pretty much all she can do is talk to animals. And that's an interesting thing. Somebody just told me that the Q&A is not up, but it is up. Like, I have questions. I mean, it says it's up. So I see that people are not able to do that. So let's figure that out real quick. I see a question here, but it's not coming up in the thing. So I'm just going to keep this extra page up as a separate thing. So anybody who wants to, if you find the Q&A, then you can post into the Q&A. And if not, feel free to go ahead and post into the thing here. But I see here, it says AMP has a definite metaplot. Can you compare it to other Metaplot games, and how does it differ and compare to those? Oh, let's see. Oh, no, it did pop up. Okay, so yeah, the question popped up. I guess you just post the question in there, and it'll pop up for me whenever. I don't know. So let's see. So yes, AMP has a definite metaplot. Can you compare it to other Metaplot games? How does it differ compared to those? Thank you, Lowell. So what? Okay, so other Metaplot games. Obviously, there are other games that kind of span the time. The most famous, obviously, for me at least, is Vampire. Vampire does a lot of that. I would say what I try and do with my Metaplot, though, is, and White Wolf in general has a major Metaplot thing. At least the old World of Darkness did. The new World of Darkness, not so much. But what I tried to do that was slightly different with my game with Amp Year One was I really wanted to try and tell a story without that story being obtrusive to the overall experience in the game. I already knew going forward that people were going to buy this game and say, I just want this for the mechanics and I just want to play my own game. But what I was really trying to do was really kind of tell a story and set a framework for a type of story to be told, which was something that needed to get done, in my opinion, because there aren't that many games that do that. But Amp Year One, what it does is it kind of shows you the progression of that first year and kind of tells you what happens. But there are large gaps. I'm not, like, none of this stuff is, like, world-changing. Most of these things are, hey, there was this kid over here and he did this kind of thing. A lot of them are just kind of ideas for you to jump off of. A lot of them are just things that could happen in your game to give you inspiration for other things that can happen in your game. And while there are stars of the game, like Dr. Luminous, Critter, Conduit, and the Matriarch, those being Shavar Stevens, obviously, from the UHF, those particular people are kind of the stars of the story. They have more involvement in the metaplot that's going on, but at the same time, those characters can be easily switched out or just used as NPCs. A lot of the time, people see metaplots as inhibiting and like, well, I wouldn't know how to tell a story if I didn't use the story that's in here, and that's obviously not the intent. The intent is to show you what can be done with a story in AMP, and especially AMP Year 1. Now, the thing that is different about what AMP Year 1 is doing is it's setting the stage for AMP Year 2, AMP Year 3. We actually have it planned up through AMP Year 5, which is what's going to then end the line. It's going to be a 5-book deal, 5 major books, and then obviously we're going to have some adventure books and maybe some strain books or organization books or whatever on the side. We're going to release other things, but there's going to be 5 major year books that, you know, and at the end of the 5 years, we're hoping that we will have had the chance to complete the story in a satisfactory way for everyone who's been following it. So, okay, I think that handles that first question. Lowell, if you have follow-up questions or whatever regarding the Metaplot, let me know. I think I rambled on enough for that. So I'm marking that one as done. The next question is not a question. John just said what needs to be done for anybody to ask a question. So I'm going to mark that one as done too. The next question, all right, so we got it fixed and reading me fine here, so that's good. Always glad to be read fine. All right, so Lowell, you did have a second question, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there, and it's in your experience about how long does character creation take? The quick answer to that is if you know what kind of character you want out of it, and you know the rules and whatnot, I have been able to make a character in about 15 minutes. And that's, of course, going in, knowing what kind of character I want to make, you know, and knowing, you know, the personality of the character, knowing what kind of powers I want. Now, of course, for somebody who is just grabbing the book for the first time, I could see it taking, you know, 45 minutes to an hour, only because the powers chapter alone is 100 pages, and it really makes it. It's a little bit of a read. You know, that's kind of the thing with any kind of supers game is, you know, what can you do becomes a major question, and there are a lot of pages to answer that question. But I would say probably about 45 minutes to an hour if you're a newbie, but out of the 33 backer characters that are, out of the 33 pre-generated characters that are in the core book, I wrote up 25 of them, and it took me, I don't know, a few days of just kind of doing it here and there of, you know, just, hey, I'm going to do this one, I'm going to do this one. I mean, what mostly took the time was the 250 words of each of their backgrounds. So, you know, the statting them up was actually really, really easy. It was the backgrounds and laying it all out and approving artwork and all this stuff that really took the time. But yeah, 15 minutes when you get good and you know what you want. So next question is from Sean, and it says, as the timeline advances, will more AMP types and powers be created? I will answer that with a partial yes. Yes, there will definitely be more powers. Not only will each new yearbook introduce new powers for the existing strains, but we've already started with the write-ups of some of the adventures of creating new augments for existing powers that reflect things that happen in those particular adventures. For instance, in one of the adventures, the first one that should actually be released pretty soon here, that one is actually going to be, it's going to include a few new augments for the leash power, because not only is Critter an important NPC to the adventure, but also the bad guy that you guys are going up against uses leash. And there's a very positive kind of good guy extra augment, and there's a very kind of augment for for the enemy is for them to use during the adventure. And instead of just saying like, hey, they do these things, and there's no way you can do them, we're actually adding the additional rules in where it fits in order for anybody who's playing that type of character to go ahead and take the role and take that power as one of their own. So I'm pretty excited about that aspect. Also, I would say, because the AMP types, the 9 AMP types were kind of created to be all-inclusive. If you can come up with any power, and it will probably fit into one of those 9 strains. However, we are coming up with other things. For instance, Ampere 2 is going to have the Gadgeteer power. Now, it doesn't fit within the 9 strains. It is actually going to be the first power in the game that can be taken by an AMP or as a SAP, which is what we call regular people. Yeah, I mean, the idea is to definitely expand on the types of powers and whatnot that you can have, and really kind of, really dig into what we can do with this, with the powers. Now, I'll go ahead and say that I am not a fan of power creep, so none of the new powers are going to be more powerful than existing powers. They will be on par and will give more options, but will not be quote-unquote more powerful. So yeah, there you go. All right, so then the next question here is, what sorts of villains are we to expect in upcoming books? In your mind, who is the most obvious threat, and who is the most secret threat? Hopefully everybody enjoyed my weird voice reading of that question. But, so, the thing about Ampere 1, and this was a funny thing that kind of came up during the Kickstarter, was the saying, the tag, the catch line, that's not, the catchphrase for Ampere 1 became no heroes, no villains, just hard choices. And what I've done actually with this is I've really tried to expand on that when we come into this world and trying to come up with characters that for instance, looking at the story thus far, Dr. Luminous started off as a very good guy, and he kind of got, his emotions got the best of him near the end. You have Conduit, who is leading a group of these people who don't believe they're even human anymore and that they don't need to interact with humans, and yet they're the most compassionate of all the groups. So immediately people think, oh, they must be like Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil, and actually they're quite the opposite. They're very much of the, well, we are different, but we need to live in harmony with the humans, or we need to just remove ourselves so that there isn't any harm to us or to people that we care about. So there's that. Yeah, I would say the most secret threat in terms of the setting, would be probably the matriarch, only because she's such an underlying kind of character that not a whole lot of people really know about, and all of her moves are very calculated. It actually is building even more in year 2. Typhoon, which is the matriarch's group, they don't really take any direct action. Everything that they do is kind of on the side, or it's always, they did this thing, and people are like, why did they do that? And it's just like, oh, well, because it's going to play a part later on. So there's that. UHF obviously being the most obvious threat towards AMPs in general. or when it actually goes into year 2, people who are friendly to amps also kind of bear the brunt of the United Human Front's ear. So it's pretty good. But I don't think there are any real obvious individual villains, as there are groups of people, and obviously there's ranges of people in between good and evil within each group. All right, so let's see. Sean's question here. Have you thought about creating alternate settings / timelines using the same power system? Could I see, like, I could see playing something like Planetary with this game. I haven't played Planetary, so I don't actually know what that is. But in the back of the book, in the back of Amp Year 1, I did kind of give some ideas as to ways to kind of run this using the same system. You know, for instance, I kind of mentioned if you were to go to high school magic place, kind of like Hogwarts, if you were to play Harry Potter with this. And it could be that, you know, each of the different houses is good at a certain kind of magic, and it could be that, you know, there's the shaper group, and then there's the shifter group, and you know, it's you could also just throw amp out entirely, the setting. You know, I hope people don't, because there's a lot of work put into the flow and the logic of it all. But obviously people can throw it out if they don't care for that, and they just kind of want to throw it around and play some games. I mean, so you could easily just say, well, I'm not going to be a mutant, I'm going to be a robot. Well, I'm not a mutant, I'm going to be an alien. And that doesn't really change anything. That's just you saying that you're something different. And, you know, and if that helps you enjoy the game better, then go for it. All right, my friend just told me that Planetary is a comic book written by Warren Ellis, and even though I have read some Warren Ellis stuff, I have not actually read that one. Yeah, exactly what you said, Sean. I mean, it's kind of like that then. It's very much like that. But yeah, I mean, so I mean, I even address that in the book, is like, hey, you know, if you really don't want to play in, you know, the world that I've created, there are ways around that, and it's not that, you know, picking to be a robot that has these powers versus being an alien that has these powers is really going to be any different. But whatever trappings you want to play with to have fun, I say go for it. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and mark the Planetary thing here as also done. But thank you for letting me know that. I'm going to have to pick that up. That might actually be good inspiration for, you know, the upcoming books, maybe. All right, so the next one is from Lowell. Hey, Lowell and Sean, you guys are awesome. Some supers obviously handle combat faster than others. If Marvel Heroic, Fate, OSR Marvel lie on one end, and Wild Talents and Champions lie on the other, with MM3 and DC Heroes in the middle, where does AMP fall? Where's the trade-off of speed to crunch? I would say mechanically, it's closer on the end of, so it's probably kind of in the middle, along with M&M and DC Heroes, but then also leaning slightly more towards the Fate end of it all. And because a lot of the rules, while they might seem crunchy, they're actually not. I mean, they really are. The entire system is roll 1d20 and add these modifiers. So it actually makes it really, really easy to figure out how the powers work together. That was also part of the reason why there were no attributes in Amp Year 1, is because I really wanted a very flowing kind of way to make powers work, and that they work almost like skills would work. So for instance, like I was running an adventure the other day, and somebody was playing the character Carver, who's a changeling that has giant claws. He's a scientist. And he's just like, so if I wanted to hit this guy, what would I roll? And I say, you roll fighting plus claws. You're going to hit him with your claws, right? Yeah, roll fighting plus claws. That's what you roll. And he was just like, oh, that makes sense. So, you know, and that was kind of the way that it all kind of worked out was it was made to run quickly. Everybody rolls initiative. You say what is it that you want to do with your attack? Like, well, I want to inflict harm. Well, then you would inflict harm. Well, I want to disarm them. Well, you go to disarm. And there are a lot of choices, but they're all, I mean, and a lot of people sometimes see the number of choices and, you know, kind of, you know, cower. They're, oh, well, there's too many choices. I can't just say I hit them. You know, but the fact that there are a lot of choices in AMP Year 1, I think is what also brings up the strategy and really makes it kind of come alive. But I would say it's somewhere in the middle as well, leaning more towards Fate. I wouldn't say it's as light as the Marvel Heroic, but it's on that scale. It's around there. So yeah, all right, there you go. Yeah. So I mean, there is a little bit of crunch, but I wouldn't say it's enough to make it as crunchy as some of the more crunchy, you know, M&M, DC Heroes, Champions, and whatnot. All right, so we do have another question here from Mario. I actually know Mario. So given your catchphrase for the game, do you feel that as a GM, it's your job to create and place the players in a situation that will force them to make hard choices? Yes. And that actually goes for any adventure that we're going to be releasing. There will be hard choices that will have to be in all of them. It's never going to be, hey, there's this bad guy and he's trashing downtown. Well, I go punch him and I crash his entire face. Yay, go team! It's not going to be really like that. It's because there are no supervillains and superheroes. You're all people. And if that dude is trashing downtown, there's probably a reason for it. Now, do you care about that reason? Well, if you don't, then you might just go smash his face in with Behemoth and shatter his face. And then you find out that he's doing it for, you know, XYZ reason that, oh, now you feel kind of like a jerk for not stopping yourself and thinking about it. There is a certain level of, I really kind of wanted to make this game to go against what the convention is for superheroes games. A lot of superheroes games is give us something to hit, and this game is a lot less of give me something to hit and more along the lines of, wait, there's something going down, we need to figure out what this is and figure out the best way to handle this. And sometimes the best way to handle that is to hit something. You know, you can't, I mean, that's just how that works sometimes. Other times, it may appear that way, but if you take a moment and think about the answer, could be right in front of you, even though you're not seeing it, because you really just kind of want to hit something. And obviously, you know, I'm not trying to typecast. Everybody has a different play style. I'm just saying that most Supers games are give me something to hit. So yes, hard choices all the time. I never try and make easy choices. There should always be something that you need to think about. Always hard choices. So thank you for the question, Mario. So this question from Rifus, who is Bill. As AMP is AMP leading up to cosmic level threats like what happened at the end of the Line of Brave New World RPG? Well, what was going to come in Crossroads source books as AMP leading to the type of event down the line? I would say at this point, no. That's not really what AMP is set up to be. It's not a cosmic level game. I don't know if it will ever become a cosmic level game. I mean, it could. Um, I would say for right now, it's not in the cards for um, at least through year 3. Year 4 and 5, who knows what'll happen in year 4 and 5. But we've got pretty much 2 and 3 down as to where our story arc is going to take us, and I'm pretty excited about it. But I would say it's probably not going to be a cosmic level thing. Um, an amp at their most powerful would obviously be able to probably handle that, depending upon their powers that they chose. But I would say that it's not really the type of game. Our game is more grounded in and tries to kind of go into the realism of what would happen in this particular situation where people would get powers. Now, and that is a combination of, how does this affect the characters individually, and also how does this affect characters on the grand scale of societal changes and effects. And again, there weren't a lot of them in year 1, because year 1 was really kind of about discovering the powers in the first place. And year 2 has a lot to do with how society as a whole is reacting to people with powers in the face of, obviously, everybody's first view of people with powers was that horrifying event that happened at the end of the year, which I won't spoil just in case people haven't seen it or read it. Hopefully, people will give it a shot and find out what that thing is. It's pretty bad. So thank you for the question, Bill. The next question is, as the line timeline advances, will there be rules or mechanics for PCs gaining powers or creating followings organizations? That's actually a really cool idea. Creating powers, probably not, but what I want to actually do is and this is not going to be in year 2, it might be year 3, but I'm going to start giving more rules as to how to combine powers and come up with new augments based on combining powers. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And I am actually kind of working on that, but I don't think that that's going to be ready for year 2. I think that'll probably be year 3. Year 2 gets gadgets, and I took a long time to figure out how gadgets were going to work, because I didn't want them to be this kind of add-on. I needed it to flow seamlessly with the rest of the powers and the rest of the abilities that characters could get. So part of that was that gadgeting needed to fit, and that's why it took me 6 months to figure out how to make that work. It kind of stunk that it took that long, but I really like where it went in its final product. Creating organizations, now that's a different thing that I hadn't actually even thought about. I could see that being a pretty cool thing. I mean, essentially, it's giving up the freedom of 4 bonus points. I mean, if we want to talk about it mechanically, giving up the freedom of 4 bonus points to be spent anywhere, to spend, I think it's 6 or 7 bonus points on static things that fit in with the group. So that's how you would make up your own organization. Now, the organizations that I'm making for the books fall in line with the organizations that go with the storyline and the story that we're trying to tell. But I could totally see including some rules for, yeah. All right. Somebody who I talked to a bunch, John, make a note of that so that I can think about that later. I think that that's a really good question. I'm going to mark that one as done. John's question, is there any plan to port AMP to the PIP system? No. Sorry. I know everybody's really sad to hear that. It's not going to be a PIP game. The system that was created for it was very purposefully created for it. So, no. All right, next question. All right, so hey, it's Stacy. So Stacy's first question is, finally found out how to comment. All right, so that's not a question. I'm going to click that one as done. But her actual question here is, yeah, there we are. Will there be new sources of power in future AMP books, or will it just be superpowers? I would say at this point, I would say it's just going to be superpowers. I had first thought of including magic, and one of the powers kind of hints that there might be magic in the world, which was mediumship, obviously. There might be spirits and ghosts and whatnot. And obviously, using mediumship in your game does add a slight supernatural tint to the game as opposed to the scientific, but it was never to be that everybody's powers are magic. I mean, it's obvious where the powers came from reading the backgrounds. But in a way, yes, we actually are. We're introducing, gadgets in year 2. There are hints at the beginnings of cybernetic implants in year 2. So that is something that could grow into a, well, now I'm going to make a cyborg character. You can be a superpower character, and I'll be a cyborg, and then I'll be a gadgeteer. And the idea is to, again, not to just throw everything in the kitchen sink into the book, but to make it a very organic kind of experience. Gadgeteers didn't make sense in year 1 because there wasn't the need for gadgeteers in year 1. Now there are, because now in year 2 everybody knows about powers. Everybody knows what's going on, and there are amps out there. And then people start coming up with gadgets because they need to keep up. And I think that's going to be part of the appeal of AMP, is that everything unfolds logically. And yeah, everybody wants everything right when they want it. But we are trying to create a different kind of experience with AMP, and not just, again, throwing the kitchen sink and everything. So yes and no. I mean, kind of. I'm sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you, Stacy. All right, so I have James, and his question is, did White Wolf's Aberrant serve as inspiration? And I would say, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you actually notice here, I actually have a copy of Aberrant right here on my desk, because I have been reading it recently. It's a great game. The thing about Aberrant for me as a GM and as a player is that I found it hard to have continuing stories with it. I loved grabbing the book and making characters, and we would play, 1 or 2 sessions before the power creep just became too much, and then the game would break down. And I'm not saying anything bad about Aberrant, because it still to this day is one of my favorite games. But obviously when I was creating AMP Year 1, I really wanted to curb away from that and make it not do that. AMP Year 1 can be played and has been played for several sessions going through, and there isn't any feeling that you earning those experience points that you're going to buy something that's going to destroy the game, because that happened quite a bit in my Aberrant games, just all the time, just all the time. So there's that. But yes, it was an inspiration. I liked the way that it went. And it kind of played around with superheroes as celebrities, and it was darker and stuff. What I kind of wanted to do was get away from the idea of superheroes as celebrities, and that might still eventually happen in the AMP timeline, but not until after players experience a lot of growing pains as society starts to begin to accept that there are people with powers out there, which I think is, again, what some games overlook, is that, there's not just, hey, that dude has powers. Hey, he's pretty cool. He should go do all this stuff. No, that dude has powers, and that scares the living hell out of me. And maybe somebody should do something about stopping that guy from using his powers around me and my children and my family. And maybe that's not right for this neighborhood. And how does that affect us on a global level? And it spirals into this crazy thought cycle until you have things like the United Human Front that pop up, that are, people who are like, we really want to kind of get rid of all of these things because they're going to one day overpower humans. So yeah. Wow, that was a long-winded answer for that. I'm so sorry. So I guess the next question is Mario's again. Thank you, Mario, for participating. Will any of the various story settings cross over with AMP, Part-Time Gods, API, etc.? As of right now, all of these are supposed to be individual universes. I would love the idea of that sort of thing, though, always struck me as something that would be really, really fun. One of the first things that I did is I started a panel, and it was called Demon Ninja Gods. And it was after I'd come out with Part-Time Gods and, Demon Ninja Gods. And I always thought it would be fun to come up with a Demon Ninja Gods game that really did cross over everything. And then, of course, now that I have AMP out, it would be Super Demon Ninja Gods. So yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. I think that would probably be a side kind of silly project, though, I think, than anything that I would do seriously. The Cthulhu mythos will not show up in AMP. Sorry. Would I consider AMP more Marvel or more DC or maybe Image? I would say it's actually kind of more Marvel than anything, maybe a little bit Image splashed in there. But I would say it's definitely more Marvel than it is DC. DC, to me, in my view, has always been about icons, and it's always been about passing down mantles. So there's Batman, and then he's like this icon, this idea, and he's larger than life, and he's this powerful person. And then you have the people who he's passing down his knowledge to, so that one day when he's gone, which he'll never be gone, they can carry on in his name. And he kind of becomes Superman is like this idea of America, and just kind of trumps any kind of actual personality or anything they would be. Like, these kind of characters, yeah, they have alter egos, but no one really cares about their alter egos. Marvel, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, Marvel has always been about someone who develops a power and has to deal with it. Like Peter Parker, it's like, all right, I have this weird thing. How can I work this to my advantage? Oh crap, maybe it doesn't, because now people are trying to kill my family. So, DC has a lot of loners and a lot of people who, have lost everything, and now they're fighting for justice. And Marvel, sometimes they're just like, hey, this thing happened to me, and I'm just dealing with it. So I'd say it's more Marvel, maybe a little bit of Image splashed in there. Yeah, just a little bit. All right, so I have another question from Stacy. What inspired you to alter your system with AMP Year 1 to be skill plus skill instead of attribute plus skill? How did this system evolve to match your vision for AMP Year 1? I actually did mention this earlier, and that was that I really wanted the powers to work together with the skills. And the exact moment where it actually happened, just in case if anybody's interested in the anecdote, the exact moment it happened was when I was playtesting it, And I said, okay, so in order to make this healing check, you're going to roll IQ plus healing plus medicine. And they said, well, how about for this power, it's just power plus behemoth. And I said, well, because of the way that it's structured and it does all this stuff, and I realized that I kind of just wanted two things to be added together. And when you started adding a third thing, that it became attribute plus skill plus power, it became a little muddied. So I really kind of wanted to boil it down to two things, and that became the DGS combo, the skill plus skill. And sometimes it's skill plus skill, and sometimes it's skill plus power being used as a skill. Again, like the example that we were... this was the best part about it the first time I ran it, and I was running it at Gen Con. And this just really kind of just shows you how easy and intuitive the skill plus skill works. Is you know, we had, well, what are you trying to do? Well, I want to hit them. Like, how are you attacking them? I'm going to slash them with my claws. Cool, then you'll roll fighting plus claws. And then there was a part where they were trying to hide from, you know, these pack of dogs. And good night. They were trying to hide from this pack of dogs. And I said, what do you think you'd roll for that? And they said, stealth plus beast handling? I said, exactly. And, you know, everything makes so much sense together that it's, you know, kind of silly that I didn't do that before. I mean, and it really works out for AMP. I'm not going to say that DGS combo is going to be like the system that I use from now on. I actually am a fan of attributes. But for AMP, it made more sense to take them out. So, all right. So the next question, I believe, was from Bill again. And is there any way to travel in time, and a character that goes back in time before powers were active, would they lose their powers till they return to the time where their powers were activated? So there are time powers, but they are limited. There's only one character in the game who knows how to time travel, and that's the time-traveling assassin. However, that is not a known power. But I would say that if you did have that power, you would retain that power because you are still within your own personal timeline. This is what I learned from Doctor Who. You are within your own personal timeline even though you are going and crossing other people's timelines. So at that moment in time, you have your powers. But if you went back and saw a previous version of yourself where you did not have powers, they would not have powers, but you would because you're further into the future even though you're in the past. Yay, timey-wimey, all that stuff. So yes. So, any comic books planned with other stories from AMP? Yeah, actually, one of the stretch goals was a comic book for AMP Year 1, and it's actually just going to be a quick kind of intro comic to the world, and obviously, if people dig it, then we will do more of it. I would, love to do more on the comic book end. It's not something that I'm familiar with, so it would involve some research and making it all work. But yes, we are actually working on an AMP comic right now, so hopefully we'll have that out soon for everybody. All right, so let's see. One more from Mario. For me, when reading the AMP story, I couldn't help but think about Push, a Supers movie that I really enjoy that didn't do too well. This is the first Supers RPG that let me play the world, if you will. Did Push act as an inspiration? Actually, yes. If you look into the inspirations section during the storytelling chapter, yeah, Push is the first inspiration written, because I remember when I first saw Push years ago, like 5 or 6 years ago, I saw it, and that actually was my initial inspiration for AMP. I said, there aren't any Supers games that frame the way powers work like this. And where there are pushers and there's movers and there are, I forgot what Dakota Fanning's one was called now. It's been a while. Dreamers, let's call them. And these people have certain types of powers that kind of go along with being what they are, not, hey, everybody has a mishmash of every power they can think of. They had very defined ideas of what their powers could do, and I really dug that a lot. But that was what push was a big deal, and it was the first thing. Like telekinesis was one of the first powers that I wrote up because I was really trying to get down the feel of push, and that's why with the telekinesis power, you have telekinesis, but then you can also do a force shield, which you can also do a rush attack, and then you can do all these different things with it, even though it's still within the same power set. And that was a big deal when I was designing how the powers work. So yes, Push, really good movie. I don't know why it didn't do well, but I don't really like Push. Push is really good. So let's see. I have John's question here. Currently, we are seeing a very realistic look to the outfits that the signature characters wear in AMP. Will outfits get more and more fantastic, like Superman or Captain America, as time goes by? I would say yes and no. Fantastic, no. Uniformed, yes. Some of the characters in Year 2 have an active uniform that they put on, but it's not a widespread thing, and obviously it might become a widespread thing. Again, who knows what will happen in the future. At this point in the AMP storyline, most AMPs do not want to be seen as an AMP, so they don't want people to know that they're an AMP, so wearing a big sign that says, hey, I'm an AMP, will only bring you bad things at this point. So, but as time goes by, who knows? I would say not right now, at least, but maybe in the future. Stacy asks, what is your favorite strain and power in API? An AMP. I keep saying API. It's those darn letters. Both start with A. If I have a favorite, I would actually say my favorite strain is probably Feral. I really like all of the combination of powers that come along with being a Feral. I would say my favorite individual power, though, is Transmutation. I like useful powers. Some people are more about the big, flashy, showy powers like Behemoth and blasting and bolts and stuff like that. And I'm actually more of I like these powers because they're useful. Transmutation allows you to change the color and shape of things. And oh my god, if that's not super helpful, it's like it's not super powerful, but it's useful, and that's the main thing that I dig. At least for me, everybody has their own thing. But yeah, but Feral, favorite strain, Transmutation, favorite individual power is what I would say. Question from John, looking at the outfits of the signature characters, Peems, oh, well, that was the same question. You reworded it. Will they be more fantastic and outlandish like Superman and Iron Man? Again, Superman, not so much. Iron Man, maybe. Which I don't consider the Iron Man suit an outfit. I consider it a suit of armor that will blast the hell out of somebody. So, I guess it's what you're going to be calling an outfit. I mean, I guess the Silver Surfer wears an outfit. Well, he's got the little surfer jams that are built into his skin, which is just weird. So, yeah. So, I currently don't have any questions, so I'm going to start rambling now. We did actually build in an extra 30 minutes into this meeting. We have actually been here for an hour. So we could stop here, or we could obviously go for the additional half hour if there are more questions. If there are not, then I may just cut it short and make this a nice hour-long YouTube video. I know most people have a problem watching ones longer than an hour anyway. I have a problem watching ones longer than 5 minutes myself. Um, but I would say I do want to give just a couple of cool little just previews to year two. Year two already has 4 new affiliations that characters will be able to select from. And these are new groups that are going to be popping up in year two. And it does have 10 new powers. That's 1 new power per strain. And then gadgeteering. So it's going to have that. It's going to have new gifts and drawbacks based on new things that are happening societally and whatnot. And we're just really excited about it. And the year, we're about halfway done with the timeline. We're also going into how the existence of AMPS is affecting the world at large, not just America. Excuse me, I know the first book was mostly focused on the United States, but we actually do take a look at how it is affecting the other nations at this point in the other parts of the world. So that's actually a big deal that I did want to let everybody know that we are doing, and I'm pretty excited about that as well. We actually just did get another question from Bill. It says, are there plans to do a Mirror Darkly or alternate universe book, aka like the Marvel Zombie U or Justice Lord? So I would say at this point we're putting a lot of effort into the story that we are trying to tell, unless there are considerable funds, like maybe in the next Kickstarter, to come up with an alternate timeline, alternate setting. We'll probably stick with the one that we're working on currently. Otherwise, you know, I mean, obviously, if you guys want to pay, if you guys want to, you know, put in the money, you know, to make it worth it, I will certainly make it a stretch goal for the next AMP Kickstarter and see where it goes. I would love to explore what else we could do with this setting. Probably not a zombie one. There is already Rotten Capes out there, and I am not a fan of doing things that other people have already done. But I'm sure we could come up with something. Yeah, most definitely. That's a very good note. Thank you very much, Bill. Heath's question is, what part of the book took the toughest to come up with? So I guess it would be took the longest or was the toughest to come up with. I would say the powers was really kind of the hardest part. The powers themselves took me about 6 months of just hardcore planning and sculpting and really trying to come up with exactly what powers were going to be there, how are they going to be organized, how are they going to be used, what things were going to be called, how things flowed, and then that's where the power chart, the power flow charts came from, because, you know, I kind of wanted to make it so that it was easy to understand. Just so many things that went into making the powers, and, you know, ending up with 54 individual powers that all were unique and yet slightly overlapped with each other. Really took a lot of effort to have it come together, and it took about 6 months of active working on, not, you know, oh, well, you know, I was working on it here and there. It was like I was working on it at least a little every day, trying to come up with, well, you know, like I had weekends and time off and breaks and stuff, but, you know, it was near constant work to really get the powers down and make them work the way that I wanted them to. And again, that also involved a lot of me going out and playing as many other Supers games as I could find and get my hands on and learn how everything worked. And nothing works the way that AMP powers work. And that's actually one of the things that I'm most proud of. Like, down to the way that it's organized, down to the way that the roles work, down to the way the augments work, down to the way that juice works. Like, it is its very own really awesome mix of just greatness that I think came out of all of that. So I don't know. I really, really dig it. Obviously, I'm 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 biased in, you know, I did write it, but I mean, even if I was a consumer, this is the kind of game that speaks to me because it is so different from what else is out there. And again, that's not a slam at the things that are out there. I've played many sessions of Icons, many sessions of Marvel Heroic. I've played a lot of Aberrant. You know, so me saying that it is me saying that it is original is not a slam, and saying the other ones are unoriginal. Just saying that I'm very happy with my niche that I have carved out for AMP, and nobody can come take it. Never. Um, so, um, so James asks, will we see amps in space? Um, there won't be a dedicated book for amps in space, but yeah, there will probably be some amps in space. That would be likely year 2, maybe the tail end of year 2, maybe year 3. It's definitely going to happen, especially with some of the things that are happening in the setting in year 2 and 3. I can totally see some amps with biomorph and flight just leaving. Basically biomorph and anything that will allow you to leave the Earth. Teleportation, flight, powers like that. And biomorph is the power that would allow them to survive in space. And see, biomorph was one of those too, that a lot of people were just like, well, that seems like a crappy power. Like, what can you do with that? I'm like, I don't know, become immune to everything, adapt to your environment. Like, there's so many things that this very simple passive power allows a character to do. And again, it's not big and it's not flashy, but it's very important to the makeup of that particular amp. One of the characters, Huegar, was actually one of those, and he's a bendy kind of guy. He had the elasticity as his core power, and I gave him biomorph as a secondary power because not only can he shift his, you know, ooh, I know it's kind of weird on the screen. Not only can he, you know, bend himself and do all of those things, but he has like supreme bending, and he can bend all his organs around and everything and move them to different parts of his body. And, you know, that was part of the design of that character, is I wanted him to kind of have absolute control over the movement of his bodies, because he was a very kind of, you know, he was a bullfighter and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, he was supposed to be kind of a Vega-ish kind of character. So he's kind of, I guess, kind of Vega and Dhalsim put together. I didn't even realize I was putting Dhalsim with Vega, but yeah, pretty much he was supposed to be kind of a Vega kind of character, which is why he's Spanish from Spain and all of those kind of things. You know, anyway, yes, space. They'll probably be in space. Mario asks, I know you feel that AMP is your best game today. I was curious which of your games is your favorite to run, to play, and why? That's a very good question. I would say my favorite to run with the right group. I would say my favorite to run is probably. That's a really hard one. I run Wuxing all the time, and people love it. I would say my favorite to run is probably Mermaid Adventures, and only because the players that I get for Mermaid Adventures are so different. You know, because they're normally little 8 and 9-year-old girls. That's really kind of what I get most of the time. Mostly little girls, but I occasionally get a little boy who enjoys himself just as much. But I would say Mermaid Adventures. It's one of those just things. It's just so fun to play. API, hands down. Especially with the new things that we're doing for API Second Edition. There are just so many fun things with API, and we're making the game so much more API-like than the original was, and kind of, you know, carving away at what it is right now and making a better experience for everybody. So I'd say yeah. So there's that. The next one is, who's my favorite pre-gen from the core book? And that is a tough one, because I actually wrote up 25 of them. 25 of them are mine. I came up with quite a few different ideas. The very first one that I wrote up was Savior. I probably would say he's one of my favorites. Ripley was actually one of the last ones I wrote up, and yet he's a favorite of a lot of people like Ripley. He's kind of crazy, which is probably why. But honestly, if I really had to boil it down to who is my all-time favorite, and I'm going on storyline and theme and feeling that this character gives off, and not necessarily that the character plays the best, I'd probably say Lost Boy. Lost Boy, a little kid who doesn't really know how to use his powers, and he teleports just to the place where he most wants to be, and he's taken in by these, very altruistic amps, the Seekers, and given a home because his parents are killed right in front of him, and he's scared to death, and he's traumatized. There are just so many things to do with that kind of character, and play-wise, I've played him in a game before, and he was a lot of fun to play character-wise. And then, of course, when a fight popped up, he was him. I kind of said, hey, the GM, so I'm scared about this, right? He's like, yeah, you totally failed your fear check. I was like, all right, I teleport away. And I said, let me know when the fight's over. We were playing that character to eventually build him up, and he would become, a tougher, stronger kid. But it was slow going, and it was fun. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's going to be the end there. So thank you so much for everybody for coming out and asking such great questions and keeping me talking. I've had a lot of fun, and of course I'm always online. So if anybody has any other questions, feel free to pop on to the AMP community and ask them, or the AMP forums on thirdeyegames.net/forums to ask them. I'm so happy about the response that the game has had, and that everybody who has gotten the book and read the book has loved it. Obviously, there's a couple people who've said, whatever. Can't please them all, but I'm so happy that there have been so many people who have loved the game and are speaking out and trying to share their love of the game with other people. So that's a big deal for me as a game designer and a creator, to know that people are enjoying what it is that I put out there. And I'm always going to be trying to push the envelope and always trying to put more interesting things out there. And Amp Year 2 is shaping up to be really, really awesome. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And with that, I thank you all, and have a great night.